All right, we'll get started here and then Alyssa, you can take it from here, letting people in as they slowly make it in. Well, welcome everybody to part three of Culture Under Pressure. We're going to be talking today about how to lead when your team is carrying stress,
What?
grief, and trauma and still expects you to focus on production.
Mhm.
We just gotta, Alyssa, if you can mute whoever's on iPhone, that would be awesome. And today we're going to be talking about operationalizing it. So building things into the practice. We'll be going over some policies, protocols, and culture signals that ultimately create safety. So this is the grand finale of our Culture Under Pressure series. And today we're really committed about bringing it and implementing it into your practices so that you, after everything we've talked about the last two sessions, now you have a game plan bringing it to life. So thank you for being here. Welcome. Say hi in the chat if you'd like to say hello and where you are zooming in from. It's always really fun to see where everyone's coming from. Like I said, I'm from in Grand Rapids. Jonathan is in San Diego. Edna's in DC. Ray is with us today. Ray is in New Jersey, and Ralph is in the greater LA area. So I think we're kind of hitting all
Yeah.
all four corners here.
Yeah,
So for
that's
those of
awesome.
you, yeah, so for those of you that are with us too, just drop in and say hi. We always like to see where everyone's coming from. All right, and we just want to remind you that you are in the right place. If you are a leader that continues to find yourself managing human emotions and not just the schedule and production goals, we all know that human emotions are maybe perhaps at an all-time high, typically. I think maybe every generation says that. But there's a lot going on within our society, and a lot of people are carrying that into the workplace. And so the reason we created this Culture Under Pressure series is to help guide leaders be able to have some of those difficult conversations and just be able to acknowledge some of the emotions that people are experiencing within their companies that are compliant and within reason and within boundaries so that it can really help foster a healthy and safe culture. And this also includes having moments where maybe something is happening heavy in the world and people are just walking straight into work. And like Edna has said on the last few webinars, that those feelings in the outside world issues don't stop when somebody comes in the door. And this is, you're also in the right place if you've ever thought, I know this matters, but I really have no idea how to even start this conversation or how to talk about it without making things worse. A lot of leaders tend to say stay silent out of fear that they're going to say the wrong thing. And like we've gone over the last couple sessions, a huge reason why we want to do this is to be able to empower you to break the silence and start with some of those conversations so people can feel more seen and heard. And we're also going to be talking about helping you find the right words. So where do you start? And like I've shared so many times, I know Jonathan and I can attest to this as well. Probably the number one question we get as coaches and advisors is, Brandi, how do I say this? Right? Like this thing is happening. Like how should I approach this? So we want to make sure that you feel equipped with the right words. And so we're going to be implementing a lightweight safety operating system. So this comes without committees or corporate cosplay. We're going to talk about what you need to put in writing versus what you can communicate verbally. And Ray and Ralph from HR for Health are really going to help us with that because they are professionals in this. And their main goal is to help you stay safe and compliant in your organization. So they're going to be able to help us do that part. And then also create consistent leadership behaviors across all managers. So it's really in your culture and you live and breathe it every day. And it's not just one day or one month that, the team is feeling culturally safe, but how do you have it be consistent? Those of you that have been with us for a little bit, I'm Brandi Marzolino. I'm the founder of Courage and Joy at Work, and I also have the Empowered Leadership Experience for Women in Dentistry, and I'm also the host of the Real Talk of Dental podcast. I coach dentists and teams, and I help leaders break free of burnout, people pleasing, and guide them in communicating effectively. And I'm also known for blending my strategy along with a whole lot of soul and real talk. And Edna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming on again. This is awesome to see all these familiar faces. Like Brandi said, my name is Edna. I am the founder of the Dental Culturist. It is a consulting group for leaders, docs, and just anybody who wants to try to get ahead. I'm also the founder of Latinas in Dentistry. It's a community group for all women that are in the Latin Hispanic space that are in dentistry. So, lab techs, assistants, students, anybody that's a Latina in dentistry can join. We have resources and a community of networking and a lot of mentorship that goes in there. And so it's pretty awesome. Also own a virtual assistant company called Virtual Standard Solutions. We support practices with bilingual virtual assistants, also executive assistants, and just schedule management. So a lot of that stuff. I love building high performing teams, but definitely rooted in culture and definitely with some strategy behind it. I have an honest voice in this industry. I like standing up for the people that can't stand up for themselves or don't want to yet, and obviously a big believer in belonging and inclusivity. Yeah.
Jonathan.
Amazing, amazing. Yes, to echo Brandi and Edna, thank you all for joining us on this three-part series. It's been really great to see so many familiar faces. Along with the amount of engagement that we've experienced, it's always great to hear from other walks of life and other journeys that people are experiencing. But I am Jonathan Rocha Bonnano. I am one of the managing partners and an industrial organizational psychologist with my company Zia. We focus on talent acquisition and talent development. And my baby is Ziaversity, so all the psychodynamic leadership development and education series that I put out through my platform, Chief Psycho. You probably see a lot of that coming out, which is a lot of fun. I definitely am anchored into, I would say, providing more simplicity around the complex situations when it comes to navigating some of these emotional situations, all in an angle just to help better support the leader and the team dynamic, of course. I do believe that leadership is a load bearing function and it's not performative. It doesn't just live inside of the titles or the roles that we hold, but it really lives in the way of being inside of how we present ourselves inside of those constructs. And I'm not afraid to get real with you. If you've been a part of these conversations, you've heard me say that I don't perfume the pig, and I absolutely do not. I have a very no BS approach to a lot of these black and white semantics just to make sure that we're moving powerfully and progressively through some of these difficult discussions.
Awesome. And our two friends, Ray and Ralph from HR for Health. So, Ray, would you like to introduce yourself and share a little bit about HR for Health?
Yeah, sure. I am from the Northeast, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and I've been in dentistry specifically since 1994. So I've been accustomed to dental practices for a long period of time, and how that segues into HR for health, even though that's just one vertical that we work with, is that we know a lot of the struggles that practitioners go through on a regular basis, and it is difficult at times because people are walking into the office with the weight of the world on their shoulder, and immediately we have to understand that engagement needs to happen because patients are coming in soon to follow. But what we do is we approach each practice uniquely. We talk with the professionals and the managers that are running the business. We understand through discovery, ongoing support, and our goal is to understand the challenges that they're going through so we can give them the best advice and make sure that they're not handling this information all by themselves. So they don't necessarily have to be the experts. We've got the experts in place so they can run the typical example and we can coach them through it, whether it's vocabulary, whether it's a system for follow up, or if it's a drastic issue where we need to really get involved with the approach, if it needs to be an offboarding situation. But prior to all of that, it's really getting them comfortable having those conversations with their employees so everyone can get back on track and they can feel heard as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray.
Yeah.
Hi, Ralph.
Hi there. I'm Ralph Tamandel. I am with Ray. Ray and I actually go back about two decades. Ray was very influential in my early career at a workplace where I, for the first time, had to talk to New Yorkers. And Ray said he's from the Northeast. Really, what he is, he's a deep-rooted New Yorker himself, and I called him desperately saying, "Please help! I don't know why these people keep hanging up on me." And he was able to not just coach me through, but make me a success in that area of our business.
Oh,
All this to say, I think that this is a very fortunate part that Ray and I are happen to be on this together because we are partners in crime. We have been in this industry together, and I pride myself in saying that I never burn a bridge when I work with employees, and I'm happy to say that I recruited Ray to work here at HR for Health after him and I worked together at another industry for years and years and years, which I think is something really really important for to have a long and healthy career in any vertical in any industry you're in. But living it and experiencing it and doing it are different things, right? And so the fact that I can look back at many people that I've worked with in the past and can call them at a minute's notice and say, I need help, and or would you like to get a job, or would you like to be supported in any which way or form is what makes me get up in the morning. So that's really why I'm here. Yes, we can talk a little legalese of what to do and what not to do, but really what it's all about is this proper communication and understanding how other people across the table feel, and why you're doing things the way you're doing them for them to help you with that. So that's my philosophy.
Yes, and I have to say, I've known Ray for a little bit and I've gotten to know Ralph a lot more this year. And I'm a huge fan of both of you. I think you're both awesome. And I do think that's important to note because I've been around a long time and I'm incredibly judgmental at this point. So I think the fact that I think you guys are pretty great is a good thing. But also, if you don't know Ray and Ralph, you really need to. So please find them on the interwebs and we'll give you their email addresses at the end too. But they're just you guys are both just really really extraordinary humans, so I'm glad that you were able to join us this evening. And yeah, Ray is also so New York, New Jersey that he's still drinking coffee with us tonight at 7:15 p.m. So that's how much of
There
a
we
badass he
go.
is.
That's
He's
right.
still going. He's going hard. Um, all right, so we do want to make tonight more of a collaborative discussion. So I see a lot of beautiful headshots on here, but we would hope that at some point y'all might unmute yourselves and reveal your faces behind these beautiful pictures. If you have any actual questions, because we do want to answer these and support you all here in real time. Jonathan's going to get us started with some of his ideas around how to operationalize this within your practices. But as he's sharing and as your thoughts are coming up and just, remembering what we've covered the last two sessions, any kind of conversations that you need help around, please bring them forward because we want to give this as much time so we can give you some coaching in real time and have this be a collaborative session. All right. So Jonathan, kick us off.
Awesome. 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 Thank you. All right. So, as you guys have been following along across the series, we've really examined three areas, and we're going to be digging into the third one today. But the first one was all around public stress, how it's been activated, the identity threats that many of us have been experiencing, and as also mentioned before, the weight of the world that comes in and the pressure that we're dealing with inside of those conversations that are, happening in and outside of the workplace. And then in the last session, we actually started going a lot more further deep into the authority, the communication styles, what happens when a stabilized or destabilized leader is showing up and how they're responding to the stress. But what's going to be beautiful about today's conversation is really the design aspect. How do we actually go from declaring psychological safety to ensuring it's fully instilled and understood within your organization, within your practice, and within the team dynamics that you're currently interacting with today. One thing, thanks, Brandi. One thing that's really great about this conversation, and as we're going into the design elements, is that psychological safety is always going to depend on the individual's leaders staying calm and calibrated. And the more and more stress shows up, external factors, internal factors that are going on inside of our business, we want to ensure that the structure is going to remain integrous so that way it does not react or crush, or I would say, not even crush, I would say becomes so fragile for the next stress cycle ends up showing up within your environment. Because safety must become structural before it can even become durable to withstand any of those external stressors coming into play. So when we start thinking about the organizational fragility, when public stress really begins to come in, it's important to remember that stress is not just an indicator of dysfunction. It is an indicator of data. And you want to understand what that data is actually showcasing to you. What's it saying? What's it eliciting? What type of conversations is it sparking? What is the overall energy and feel that you end up experiencing as a result of that public stress coming into play? When we start experiencing those actual stressors, we begin to see that there is a lot more system fragility because we start defaulting to some of these 4 areas just out of habit. We start looking at personality-based leadership. How is this person showing up this way? Is it because of horoscopes? Is it because Mercury's in retrograde or in the microwave? Or is it just because of the conversations that are taking place as a result of the individual and the impact that they're experiencing? We also start looking at informal enforcement based off of biased expectations, or even just based on mood that we're in today too. That then leads to the type of punishment, the conversations that we're experiencing as well, which then lead into unwritten and unspoken expectations too. These can be sometimes the most detrimental because you might have a thought or a viewpoint of something, but it's only staying with you, and then it's not communicated down the road or down the line inside of the team dynamic, which then impacts them inside of their overall clarity and understanding as well, which also leads to the emotional consensus. We typically find ourselves utilizing a lot of terminology around burnout, boundaries, expectations, interests, accountability, ownership. We start labeling as opposed to really digging deep to understand, where is this fragility actually taking place? What degree of that impact to that stressor is actually present as well? And before we even dig into those aspects of it, we follow the labeling conversations. And that doesn't really help when we're trying to get clear and really alleviate the stressors of the world that's coming into play. But one thing I want to make sure that we're really clear about this specific section when we start looking at what's fragile and what isn't, is what is the overall resilient state that we're also looking to build? Because resilience isn't just built off of the systems that are created. It does have that personality influence that comes into how they're withheld and how you actually create that dependability, along with the level of clarity that you want to ensure that's present too. When we start thinking about the actual fragile states of our organization, it becomes very, I would say, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say oversimplified in the context of which we try to create complexity and we start looking at what the future potential impact is going to be, as opposed to sitting with what it currently is today. And that's where our standards of practice begin to get a little misconstrued. What I have found inside of producing a level of safety is actually understanding what systematic level does that safety require. When we start looking at standards, we've all heard about SOPs, work instructions, workflows. Of course, those need to be documented, but you also want to go a deeper layer by understanding where those decision rights and authority levels are actually staying true to ensure that those escalation pathways that will show up actually make a difference inside of ensuring that safety doesn't get evaporated, but it is actually in tune and installed within the organizational infrastructure from any conversation, from any dynamic, from any systemic level stress response that might come up in the near future too. So when we start thinking about this area, this is more a question for the group. What specifically produces safety at your system levels today? Is it a person? Is it the technology that you're utilizing? Is it the conversations that you're having within your morning huddle? What aspects or what actions are you taking currently to ensure that level of safety is even being measured or being understood? Next slide.
Hey, yeah, Jonathan, I want to just pause there for a second too, because I think it's helpful to restate, because somebody asked me again today too. They're like, what does emotional safety mean? What does psychological safety mean? And for those that are joining us for the first time too, I think it's really helpful to revisit, like, what does psychological safety truly mean? And I used my examples, but of course, I'd love to hear your definition of it.
Yeah, I always like to refer to psychological safety as a culture of rewarded vulnerability. And what I mean by that is ensuring that you're actually creating that safe space to have any form of discussion, no matter the type of disagreement that you're going to experience whatsoever. It's around understanding that this is a safe place for you to challenge the status quo. This is a safe place for you to be included and that you have thoughts that should be inclusive. This is a safe space for me to ask questions and fail forward, even in the instance that failure is going to be the first encounter that I experience. But it's something that I'm going to be able to work through, knowing that my team has my back and I have theirs. Oftentimes, we think that psychological safety is just a term of agreement and agreeance, meaning this is what we're going to be doing, so you have to follow it. And that is actually the opposite side and opposite spectrum of how psychological safety gets cultivated. We all have default behaviors and we all have default mechanisms that we refer back to. But the beauty of psychological safety is ensuring that all of those aspects are not only valued, but also being seen and given a platform, an opportunity to be spoken to. So I always default back to rewarded vulnerability. I always have been the person that has come to the conversations that, I might see something that doesn't make sense. So I speak up. And in an effort to ensure that psychological safety is present, I have to be responsible for ensuring that I'm bringing that level of safety too. Just because I have an opinion about something or I have feedback or research or data around it doesn't necessarily everybody else has access to it. But it does mean that we can come together to share about it, discuss about it, dissect it if necessary, and then identify what we can actually bring forward without the expectation of it's my way or no way. And I think that's where we also end up experiencing bias leadership as well, because we think that it just lives within the title. So then we automatically assume psychological safety is going to be present because I'm the boss. But it doesn't. We deal with a lot of different personalities. We deal with a lot of different factors of life and work and role types and experiences. So being able to create that safe dynamic and safe space just for conversation to unfold, I think is the best way forward to ensure that level of safety does become developed within your organization or within your practice.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. And I know we do have some, longtime listeners, first time callers on today's session. I love that. But what you said, there was so much richness in that. And there was a lot of nuance too that I want to tease out a little bit because one, just because you're a leader doesn't mean that, and everybody likes you, doesn't mean that you run a psychologically safe environment, right? So likability doesn't mean psychologically safe because people do have the minority opinion. And if somebody does have questions about things, do they feel safe enough to ask it in front of the group and or within leadership? And I also like how you pointed out a lot of times people don't have access to the data and information in order to make an educated or to process like what you're giving them, right? So a lot of times in like day-to-day stuff is you have leaders coming up with goals, right? Or new operation standards. And they say, okay, everybody, from now on, we're going to be doing this, right? And because we back here in the C-suite or whatever, in our leadership meeting, we came up with all these new protocols, and now we need all of you to do this. And something that I do a lot in my coaching work is explain to people why, right? Because everybody needs to know the why, and that gets overlooked a lot is the why behind it. And if people don't have the comfort to be able to ask, well, hey, can you explain this a little bit? Or why are we doing it this way? Because we've been doing it this way forever. Why this now? That's an example of somebody not feeling psychologically safe to ask those questions. And I think that's really important to tease out because my guess is most people work in environments that are not as psychologically safe as they think they are because they feel intimidated to ask questions. And I think that's really important to point out. I also really like on your slide the emotional consensus part because I think sometimes there's a little bit of like emotional bullying with group think. So I'm pretty sure everyone on here knows, for example, that I'm a sober person. And, just a shout out to those people that are sober. A lot of times, group and company functions revolve around alcohol. So if you're having a big Christmas party and it's going to be at this bar and everyone's getting drunk and blah, 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 and everyone's like, oh my God, this is so great. It's going to be so much fun. For those people that don't feel comfortable in that environment, do they feel safe enough to say, hey, team leaders, do you think we could do something that maybe doesn't involve alcohol for another party or have that be the primary thing that we do? Because I think we can do team building in a whole different way that would be fun to do, right? But if
Yeah.
there's a lot of that group think, it can be a little intimidating. And I think sometimes people feel intimidated to speak up and then they end up being the last one out. Ralph, it looks like you have something you want to share.
No, I think that it's a very important point to make, and for you as a leader to recognize that
Mhm.
people may not feel empowered or even um, in that is not their place to even question something. And
Mm.
so I'll give you an example that I hear a lot, just by the sheer title that I have. New employees feel intimidated by me. And by me saying, hey, it's perfectly okay, you can reach out to me every time, anytime you want, that doesn't mean anything to them because they've heard that their entire career. And that
Mhm.
is not how this is going to work. What you have to do privately is reach out to them directly and start that conversation. Right? Like that is what makes people feel comfortable, i.e., opening that gate or that talking point. So that's how I would interpret what Jonathan was saying of how
Mhm.
I practice it. But like me as an operator, this is what I do because I know this is. It doesn't matter that I'm intimidating or not. Fact is, people feel that way because by the sheer fact that I have a C title. That's it. And I need to be aware of that and I need to be proactive about it as a leader because that's what a good leader should do, in my opinion.
1,000%. And I say that to leaders all the time. When you're the check signer, you hold so much weight and people are so intimidated by you. And you might feel like you're just an average Joe or Jane or whomever, but that's not how the team sees you.
100%.
Yeah, totally right.
Yeah.
If anyone has any examples of this, or you want to get some coaching around this, or you have a conversation, or anything's coming up for you as we go through this, feel free to raise your hand, drop a note in the chat. We'll stop whatever we're doing and we'll chat with you. So please speak up. All right, Jonathan, go ahead.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you. So moving into psychological safety as an output of design, and I believe Edna touched on this inside the last session when she shared about open door policy and open communication and coming in, and I had made the remark about it's open door until somebody starts knocking, and that's like just kidding. We're not having that conversation today. But no, it really is. And it's important to recognize that safety is something that must be prioritized in discussion in order for it to be reciprocated in both feeling and in terminology and language that you're expressing. It's not just something that you wake up one day on a Tuesday morning and you declare that this is a psychologically safe environment. So everybody just better start speaking up and having a good time and enjoy yourself. And if anything beyond that, I don't know what to tell you. It is something that you have to structure. It's something that you have to be intentional about if that is the outcome that you're looking to produce, to experience both internally as a team, and most importantly, to trickle down into your patient experience. I've walked into practices before where I'm going into coach and consult, and you feel the weight of just the disconnection of the team to the patient experience. I've come in dressed in casual clothes and dressed in business clothes as a point of a case study to see what does that experience actually look like inside of those settings. And I can tell you that 9 times out of 10, the experience doesn't change based off of how I appear before I even speak and share. It is just felt. You walk in and you can feel the tension, or you walk in and you can feel the alignment. Both of those things have completely two distinctions inside of experiential exchanges, but both of them play a significant role inside of the perceived safety that you're about to experience within that environment as well. So one thing that I would, or not one thing, 5 things that I would say are going to be the most fundamental practices to ensure that you are building some structural procedures around how you build safety is role clarity, the decision right clarity, most importantly, policy consistency, retaliation protection, and then of course, feedback loops. When roles are unclear, people will hesitate. They don't know which road, which route, which action to take first because the lack of clarity is present. And when decision rights are unclear and create too much ambiguity, that becomes something that we all begin to self-censor because we're now working within the ambiguous environment of like, yeah, I might go this way. I might do a little bit of this. I might not operate by my time blocks. I may not go and do this on the end of my schedule because I have a little bit of wiggle room here. It leaves a lot of empty space. And for someone like me that likes to be more black and white inside of these contexts, it creates a little bit too much gray. And that's not the place that you really want to be colorful in. You want to be colorful in the areas that are actually going to allow for the change and the impact to actually take place. And of course, when escalations feel unsafe, people withdraw. I myself am a huge introvert. So inside of those conversations, I have to be responsible for ensuring that I'm creating that psychological safety for myself, to know that it's not a personal attack on me, to know that it's not an impact on my work ethic or the work that I am able to produce, but it has to be able to be constructed in an environment to where that exchange can also be understood. Fundamentally, at the core of the person is who you're worried about, making sure that they feel safe. So if you're finding ways to just, I would say, create more barriers to that, but you're also experiencing withdrawal, that's a huge signal and sign from that the structure and the systems that you've developed and installed are producing that level of outcome, as opposed to creating and designing one where that conversation can actually be a conversation. And it's important to note that design determines the safety more than any of the sentiment ever will. I can come on here and share and express all the feelings that I have around the importance of psychological safety. But if it's not understood and not prioritized, as I mentioned earlier, to where you want to feel that and experience that, it's not something that you ever will be able to have. It's not something where you can just come into the next day or your next workday tomorrow and share, we're going to start talking about psychological safety and we're going to have it created by the end of the day. You got to create the structure for it to exist for you. Find the ways that it's going to work for you. Find the ways that these conversations show up. What are some of the more points of contentions in your day-to-day discussions or interactions that just kind of keep being pushed under the rug? And in reality, they just need some attention, and they need a little bit of TLC and gardening and pruning to ensure that the conversation that you are looking to have is the one that you're actually having. But one of the biggest challenges that I always find around this specific conversation is the fairness aspect of it all, and whether or not there is any form of personal bias that starts really bleeding into these conversations. Because again, as we talked about earlier, the leader might come in and say, we're going to have a psychologically safe conversation today. But that doesn't mean that the person that's going to be on the other end of receiving that discussion is ready to be that level of vulnerable, I guess I would say. They're not ready to open their chest. They're not ready to open up themselves and be cracked open in those formats. So you have to be able to find the fine line and dance a little bit and understand which part of those aspects are going to be able to be broken into first, and then identify the next roadmap for you to move forward into creating the next pathway of success too. So, Brandi, we can go to the next slide. I think this is the last slide too. When we start thinking about structural fairness versus perceived bias in the fairness that gets developed as a result of this too, identification of personalities is a very sensitive topic in many aspects. We've learned through the very early stages of our conversations inside of this webinar up into this one, but perceived fairness matters more than stated fairness. So if flexibility is granted based on relationship instead of criteria, the safety is going to consistently fracture over time. And if the discipline that you're bringing forward into these discussions feels more discretionary instead of standardized, trust is very difficult to begin being built inside of those conversations and constructs too. It just becomes something that's being talked about and discussed, but not really ever felt or documented. And that's where we also find a lot of those inconsistencies start showing up when fairness is a conversation that we want to bring forward. And when that level of fairness isn't present, the threats that we begin to identify only increase. And fairness is the only thing that we can observe. So if we're not identifying, what's working for the structure versus what's working for the person, it becomes very difficult to understand whether or not we've even developed a structure that's even going to allow for this level of safety to be a conversation, to be felt, to be an expression, and to be fully experienced in the way that it could be. One of the things that I always like to ask practices and practice owners is, if somebody were to walk in, say an auditor, and they were auditing all of the OSHA and HIPAA requirements of your business, you have a checklist for that. You want to make sure that there's standardizations, there's protocols, there's procedures in place to ensure that you pass those audits. Have you conducted a safety audit? Have you conducted whether or not there is this space for these conversations to show up? Have you conducted an audit to determine whether or not people are coming in and they're adjusting their leadership thermostat day after day after day? Because it's not just a single temperature that needs to be adjusted. Temperatures fluctuate throughout the day in those conversations. Whether you have a high risk patient coming in that that you're going to be experiencing some potential challenges with, or you're going to have an easy prophy patient coming in and you're going to just be churning and burning. Hopefully not churning and burning, but you have somebody that's coming in and that it's going to be an easier experience as opposed to somebody that might have a more difficult one. But the question I would ask is, what level of consistency do you actually have beyond just practice norms, practice values, conversations around, mission, vision, and mantras that, are all great things to talk about. But how does that actually come into play? How does that really go into more of the expressionism, and how is it really felt inside of those discussions on a day-to-day basis? One of the things that I always like to mention as well is that we have to be willing to move from the reaction side and go into much more of a arithmetic end. Political cycles are always fluctuating. The news is always putting out something that we may or may not want to hear. And community stress is always rising and falling, between personal relationships, between friendships, between work dynamics. Change is inevitable, and it's constantly taking place around us. And if we're always reacting emotionally to it each time, safety just becomes unstable because we're operating unstable ourselves. So look at what type of standards that you're wanting to carry forward. Look at the type of conversations that you want to bring in. Look at the type of, structural fairness that you also want to make sure is present. And it's not just around, specific circumstances based off of a person. It's global, it's organizational, it's holistic. How can we take a much more holistic approach to these conversations as opposed to just keeping them very singular? And then we're just reacting to the singular event that's taking place. It's preparing for, what could or could not happen, but also knowing that, your team still has each other's back and you're still going to be supportive of one another, no matter the outcome that's going to be the outcome. But one thing an additional thing I would also like to share is that if nothing changes behaviorally or even operationally, safety hasn't improved and it doesn't become observable. So it does need to be something that you're wanting to be intentional about creating and cultivating in order for it to be a conversation moving forward. But what I'm not saying here is you don't need to go create a safety committee. You don't need to over-engineer this. You don't need to turn it into like a whole rebrand of how you're operating inside of your culture. But it is an opportunity for you to understand whether or not that's even the culture that you're cultivating today. That's the type of environment that you're actively creating as well. What type of behaviors are you rewarding as opposed to the ones that haven't been fully observed because they're kind of hiding in the shadows? So look at the systems that actually work, that can withstand pressure, and see what part or aspect of that is pressurized that could be then blended into different conversations or different standardized policies that help then support the conversation of safety, right? I say conversation a lot because communication is anything and everywhere. It's texting, it's phone calls, it's emailing. There's a lot of opportunities to really misconstrue what's being said. So it's important for us, I would say, to remove some of the emotional aspects around what's being said and looking between the lines and understanding what's actively being said. So you know where to engage appropriately and effectively, as opposed to it kind of just sitting with you. And then you don't really know how to redirect the conversation the way that it needs to go. But it needs to be a design aspect of it. Psychological safety is not just created by sentiments, it's created by structure. So you have to be responsible, not only as a leader, but as the team, to see what type of structure, what type of safety that you actually want to see intact. So when the next stress cycle comes forward, you're not falling to it, you're able to withstand it, and you're able to learn something from it as well, and then see how you redirect that aspect and outcome too. All right, I think that's my spot.
Awesome. Yeah, I put this nice little slide here, HR for Health, to help us, because now we want to talk about what is something that needs to be documented for offices to say compliant. I'd love to hear, Ray and Ralph, some of your feedback on that. I know Jonathan just did an awesome job of really explaining different ways that safety can be operationalized and come to life within the practices. But let's just say, I'm almost going to guarantee most offices do not have any kind of protocol for communication if someone has an issue versus just going to their manager or going to HR, if it's not HR for Health, whoever's representing HR in their office, and saying, I have a complaint, this is something that I'm dealing with. And Edna's shaking her head because I'm sure, Edna, you've seen that. You can chime in here too, Edna. And the manager is just like tries to handle it on the fly, and they're not emotionally or skill equipped. Maybe they bring it to the C-suite, maybe not. But guys, do you have tools like this where you can outline for people sort of the escalation of how challenging conversations should be handled, or the types of conversations that should have an operational playbook with them versus you're just handling it at the office level? Like, where does one draw the line?
You want me to take that, Ralph?
Sure, you get started, please. Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot. And Jonathan, the way you handled the dynamics behind this structure is it's commendable. You really addressed all the different pieces and just carrying the whole safety atmosphere over into something tactile. And we sometimes we don't want to understand the employee handbook as much as a document that leads into a lot of this dynamic. So if the practice owner is using um, a compliant handbook, then they're going to have a lot of details that need to be transparent for any of the employees inside the practice, no matter what size your practice is, right? If it's a single practice, multi-location, emerging DSO, whatever it might be, the vocabulary from the business owner, understanding within the guidelines of the law, right? And then we'll just take that law word and separate it and put it to the side because it's sometimes when we say law, it doesn't sound safe, right? Because it has a different position for different people inside the context of the conversation. But if if healthcare professionals are coming into an exercised environment where they can be safe, leaving their world behind in a sense, or bringing that world partially into the office and having the ability to have a conversation with someone that can recognize that they're under a little bit of stress and just be aware of it in case they're a little off pattern for part of that day. So they don't get a demerit for it, let's say, because when the door opens up, everyone needs to get on the treadmill because we've got work to do. But we're all humans. So it's understanding the differences behind that. So if there's a plan in place and everybody has access to this plan, then when it gets beyond the ability to have the conversation with a designated person, then you can go into some more formal instrumentation of sitting down, doing one-on-ones where you
Yep.
really have to talk about what needs to change
Yeah,
because we've
that'd be
given
fun.
you the safe platform. We've given you
I
the
can
ability to have these
double look.
conversations, and now we're running a little bit off into the weeds and we need to bring it together. Now, how does that reflect inside HR for Health for the people that are responsible to have these conversations? You're not left alone because if you work with us, we have trained talent inside our company that will coach you through these conversations,
Mhm.
any conversation. So, no matter where you are in the country and what you might be dealing with, this is exactly why we're in the business that we're in. It's not just to create documents and and that type of tactile structure. There's meaning behind everything because we'll understand your handbook. We'll understand what that temperament might be that's happening and will guide you to help answer those particular questions that might just come out of thin air and you really don't know how to assess that topic appropriately. So sometimes by just listen, I don't have an answer for you right this moment, but if you give me 24 hours, we can
Mhm.
sit down and talk about this. So sometimes delaying the reaction to that immediate need is the space that you need to be able to refer back to that conversation and give that individual the dialogue that they need. Did that make sense?
You did. You made a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. Ralph, did you want to add to it?
Yeah, look, I think that from a practical perspective, Jonathan said something earlier that really rang true for me, which is around communication and not underestimating that everything comes back to how to properly communicate and or how people perceive and or are able to understand what is going on. And the practicality of this is this. I think business owners and leaders in an organization spend an extraordinary amount of time building and trying to come up with the structure, the guidance, the next best thing for the organization to succeed, right? Like so in the healthcare and or in the dental space, it's very specific around technology improvement, right? Like every year you constantly have new technologies, new innovations, you have new, you name it, fill in that you need to learn, you need to understand, and you need to participate in, right? And so from an HR and or practical perspective, what you have to ask yourself is, when was the last time I had an honest conversation with my employees about what our business goals are and how these goals are being achieved? And is this still reflected in what Ray was saying in our handbook? And you would be surprised that they usually are not, because people don't look at it that way. Now, to go into a conversation with your employees and why this is so important, if you don't do this with yourself as a leader or an owner, you are
Mhm.
certainly not going to do it effectively or efficiently with your employees. Which means your employees, every day that you don't do this, will be further away from understanding why they're doing what they're doing in order to participate in the success of the business. And when someone doesn't understand why they have to do something, guess what? Their ability to not just participate, but to contribute effectively and with enthusiasm to the company's goals diminishes. And that's why these types of conversations are so important. And everything that Jonathan said before that is so important, because you have to have an environment where people feel empowered and safe to talk, where people ask questions not because they want to be a problem, but because they don't understand, because you probably haven't told them why they have to do what they need to do now
Mhm.
to be successful. So that's just one of the many things. But I want
Yeah,
to give
I love
people
that.
a chance to also ask questions. Sorry, I don't want to blab on.
No, I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I also wanted to say too, like we live in the world of obviously AI, where a lot of people, pretty much everyone, I think these days, is having these intimate conversations with ChatGPT and Claude, looking for advice. And although it can be helpful, I think there's so much risk in that. Where having a company like HR for Health is so important, because Chat and Claude don't know the legalities of every state and what's appropriate and things like that. And it's I know these systems can be helpful, but I always think use it with so much discretion, and just making sure that people go to the professionals, because AI is awesome, but ChatGPT isn't going to show up in a courtroom when you're getting sued for $500,000 because you said the wrong thing, you
That is
know.
That's
true.
right.
So, yeah, so let's open it up. Does anyone have any questions? Is this striking a chord with anybody? I know everyone's still kind of on mute hanging out. I mean, maybe we're just doing such an amazing job that we're answering everyone's questions. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone have a conversation they feel uncomfortable with, or anything they're recognizing inside their company or their office where they need some support?
I actually have one, Brandy.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I actually have one, and I'm glad that we have Ralph and Ray on also, and maybe to dig a little bit deeper. I know that in all health industries, dental or medical, um, while having hard conversations, whether it be with a patient or a team member, or a colleague. One of the biggest words that come, and this can come from a place where people are just upset, so they say certain things to you. And I know one that has come up a lot in the last 2 years. We've seen it all over the internet. Brandy, I send you stuff all the time. I'm like, did you see this article? Did you see this? Did you see that? And it's where either a colleague, a patient, or a team member has threatened either to contact their lawyer or they're saying,
Mhm.
we're going to sue you. And so I know that a lot of the times, team members, if the owner isn't there, like operation managers, office managers, or even team leads, or even dentists themselves don't exactly know what to say when those conversations come up because that person is so irate. What would be the suggestion that you guys may have if somebody uses those threatening words? Because I think out of all the threats, that's like threat number one that comes up and where people kind of shut down.
Yeah, way to start at the top, right? Like, it's like, so look, I think that, well, first of all, Edna, let me validate the observation because obviously that happens, and that is, I mean, what you said is the right thing, right? Like that's 10 out of 10, right? Like is the what was ninth? It was 1 through 9 that you did not, as a leader, address that someone has to go to that level, and that it has escalated to that point. Um, so I think what is let me start by starting at a lower level than that, because that is like, like 5 engine light fire, right? Like where you go like, look, you guys, there's a serious problem here, and I think you are beyond just saying, hey, let me talk to you, right? Like, so I think um that's number one. Number two, so let's take a step back and go like, okay, so what are indicators that a person starts feeling that way, and how do you communicate with this, or with this person and or in this situation? So my suggestion would be, and this is true for any environment, there's a simple rule that needs to be applied and can be applied effectively in HR as well, which is you praise in public and you teach and coach in private, right? For everything that Jonathan just said, right? Like it's like it literally is everything he said. For someone to feel safe, for someone to have the ability to hear you, for you to even be able to have an effective conversation, someone has to feel safe, right? And that would be my first answer to say is like, look, if something like that is, I'm going to say, creeping into either a team or a scenario, is for you as a leader, your ability to A, see it, and B, most importantly, to do something about it. By ignoring it and by not addressing it effectively, you will foster a escalation of it, right? So that would be the first part, which usually has the desired effect. Now, in all seriousness, when you get to this level, right, like you need to protect yourself and the business, and you need to acknowledge what's going on with that person, and you should, in a very professional manner, with a witness, say, I hear that you're very upset. Totally understand that. Let's de-escalate, and either have you go home, and then find a time when the waters have calmed down for everybody to have a conversation to figure it out, right? But that would be the my recommendation per se. But you have to protect your business. You have to protect yourself as a leader, because whatever you say and or God forbid you get emotional yourself, you will walk into um, something negative.
Yeah. So kind of like shut down the conversation a little bit is what I'm hearing. Like, don't say anything else. Just shut down the conversation and find an ideal time for both people to have a
Acknowledge.
conversation calmly.
Yes, acknowledge,
Acknowledge.
accept, and be okay with it. And say, look, I'm really sorry you feel this way. I can see that you're very upset. I want to talk with you. Let's figure out a better time when this can happen. How about we do this tomorrow when we all had a night to sleep on, something like that, and
Yeah.
then leave it at
Mhm.
that, right? Like
Mhm.
because, and Jonathan is way more in tune and educated on this, but there's a part of your brain that shuts off, and you just cannot have positive outcome in that conversation because people can't hear you and people underestimate that, right? And I use this for coaching all the time. Is this you need to establish a base for people to hear what you're saying because if they can't hear you they can't learn, right? And
Mhm.
so you have to create an environment where people can learn, right? And
Mhm.
that is safety, openness, understanding, all those things, right? Sorry. So that's my answer.
So typically, if I can jump off of that, if that alarm goes off, that means that individual has not been heard.
Mhm.
They've
Correct.
been poking at something and talking and asking, and no one has acknowledged what's important. Whatever it is, it was important to them. It could be something small that now just grew into something that needed to be as strong
Mhm.
as it is. So, what Ralph was saying, to be able to de escalate that, but in order to do so, you can't just try and dump a bucket of water on that and make believe it'll go away. You have to address it. I hear what you're saying. Let's find a better time as quickly as possible to be able to talk about this one on one because I really want to hear the details.
Yeah. No,
The
thank
other thing
you.
I wanted to chime in on, and I think Edna, this is something that, especially for team members who observe this, your team members that are the coworkers turn into the same person, the same type of person as your patient does. And what I mean by this is the way you behave as a leader will stick with them for a much longer time. It's the there's 100 patients you have treated extremely well. They will not say anything on social media. It's the one that you treated poorly that will step on social media. And it's the one that will remember that. And it's the exact same thing in leadership. You as a leader have to absolutely lead by example in a manner that allows the co-workers to see, oh, if there is an escalation, this person understands how to de-escalate this in a manner that is acceptable to all around us. Because I can preach all I want. It is what I do and how they feel when you do it that will make them feel safe. Not by me saying I'm a safe person. I have to behave in that manner during a crisis for
Okay.
people to then look at you and go, oh, no, they really do what they say. And
Okay.
then they feel safe and then they will actually share with you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Oh, I think that answers my question for sure. I think it's
Yeah.
important for people to hear kind of where that sentence comes from and the things that we can do to actually avoid to have that sentence even come up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the idea of not panicking and going and speaking to someone that can actually help you. You're going to get triggered if anyone says I'm going to sue you, even if in the back of your mind you're like, for what?
How
It's
dare
anyway.
you?
I
Yeah.
mean, I get mail and it says IRS in the return address. I would panic, even if it's good news, you know?
Like, I'm
Like, what
not
do
going
I
to
do?
open that for a week.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are just triggering, whether we like it or not. Um, well, fellas, and Edna, and all the beautiful profile photos we're looking at this evening, we're at time, which is hard to believe. So thank you so much for everyone for being here. I do want to give Ray and Ralph's email addresses. I just put them in the chat too. So if you want to connect with them directly to learn more about HR for Health, and you can always go to hrforhealth.com. We are going to be sending a follow-up document to everybody that's going to be summarizing the key points and the key takeaways from today's session, along with contact information for HR for Health as well too. I think this was amazing and super helpful. And I don't know. How do you guys want to wrap this up? Any closing thoughts, Jonathan, Edna, Ray, Ralph? What do you got?
Thanks for having us. It was really great. Jonathan, very insightful. I loved your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Edna, take it away.
Yeah, no, I just thank you guys for joining. Again, you don't have to do any of this stuff alone. There's massive support within this room. Brandi, myself, Jonathan are here to support you through your hard conversations, through your questions, making sure that your team has a safe environment is important, not only for your team, but especially for you. So you have the support. There's community groups like Latinas in Dentistry also where people can network together. There's a bunch of other great resources out there for your team and for yourself as well.
Yeah, and we will be following up. We'll be sliding into your inboxes here soon to talk to you some more about community, because like Edna said, we do not do this alone. And like Jonathan and Ray and Ralph also shared, self-awareness. I always say self-awareness is the key to the kingdom. So you really have to be self-aware for any of this to work. So really understanding who you are as a communicator, who you are as a leader, where your values lie, what your trigger points are, all of those things too will really empower you to be a successful leader. So you know when to get help and you know when something's outside of your zone of genius, and having the humility to get the help that you need is super important. So thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for making a
Thank you
difference, and thanks for your
guys.
Thank
commitment.
you.
Thank
Have a beautiful
you.
Bye,
night.
Bye,
Okay,
everyone.
bye
everybody.
Care.
everybody.